All right, reading today. Uh-oh, that's not what I meant to have happen there. Reading today, you need your reader's notebook and a pencil, y'all. We need to see today that you are participating in the work and you're writing things down. So I need you right now to go grab your reader's notebook and a pencil. If you've got one sitting next to you. If not, grab some loose leaf paper, but you need to be engaged in this lesson today. It's going to be super important to use this lesson moving forward, especially in your own reading. So you need your reader's notebooks out with a pencil. I'm giving everybody in this class 30 seconds right now to have your reader's notebook and your pencil in your lap or sitting on a table or something next to you, ready to go. 30 seconds. All right, so before we get started with our goal and everything today, I want to kind of make a connection about the work we've been doing and the work we're going to continue to do. All right, and that is today we're going to really look at, do readers, should we pay attention to every last little detail in a story we're reading and identify that detail is important, or there are specific details within a story that we really need to make seem more important, that stick out and focus on. And so I thought of, when I was thinking of this, like the people who judge the dogs and the dog shows, right? When they have dogs like walk out and stand up on the table and they walk around and look like those expert dog judges. Raise your hand if you've ever seen like the Westminster Dog Show or something like that on TV before. So let me see. Sorry, I got to pull up the camera view so I can see who all's got their hand up. So raise your hand one more time. Sorry. If you've ever seen like a dog show on TV or on camera before, so just a few people. Okay. That's all right. So these expert judges, they kind of like walk around, they have the dog come up on a table, and then they have to like look at the dogs that are within the same breed category and decide which dog is like the best in show or looks the best, right? So they have to have a person walk the dog, and then they pick them up, put them on a table, and they kind of like feel certain parts of their like coat and their shoulders and everything like that. And so they have a specific thing in mind when they're looking for, right? They don't just step back and look at the whole dog and go, oh yeah, I see this, and make observations. They say, okay, I'm going to look at the color of their coat. I'm going to look at the arch in their back. I'm going to look at the way their cheekbones are shaped or the way their ears sit. They look at all these different things when they're judging a dog. And we kind of are doing that in our book, right? And it's important to understand that people who are these expert dog judges, it's not like they just go in and they know how to do it, right? They don't just become an expert dog judge in a week. So we can't really expect ourselves to become these really fantastic, great readers who understand every last detail in a week either. It's a work in progress that we've been working on in this unit, right? And so today we're going to take another step forward in really understanding how to kind of focus on the right details and pay attention to very specific things when we're reading. So let's see. Alexander, can you read today's goal for us? Sorry, Alexander Juarez.
Me?
Yeah, you. Alex J. That's what we're going to call you, Alex J, and there's Alex M. So Alex J, can you read it for us?
Our goal to know that readers pay attention to details that show characters' desires and obstacles they encounter and the ways they respond to those obstacles. They are likely to gain an insight into both the characters themselves and their stories.
Thank you. Excellent job, sir. So what that means is we're really going to look at what is our characters' wants and desires. What do they want to happen? What do they wish would happen on the inside? What challenges, that's what kind of like the obstacles or the roadblocks or the challenges that they come across throughout the story. And then how do they respond? What do they do when they see those obstacles, right? And so they're likely to get, if we do that and we're paying attention to that, we're likely to understand our character better, but also just overall what's happening in the story. So we're going to practice that with the Tiger Rising, and then we're going to talk about it in small group and on our own today in our own book. What does that mean? So if you could open up your notebooks, I need you to write down these 3 things that we do. So if you could open up to the whole group section. Thank you, Cynthia. I see her already getting her notebook open. We are going to check this later in small group to see that you have it written down. Thank you, Guadalupe. I can see your notebook is open. CJ's getting his open, and I see Clay opening his. So in the whole group, we're going to write down grow ideas about a character. All right, and we're going to write down 3 things. Why might a character act like this? That needs to have a question mark on the end. Sorry. So why might a character act like this? How do the character's new actions change our ideas? And then pay attention to a character's desires and how they are achieved. So those 3 things we're going to write down in our notebooks, because those are 3 things we should focus on when we're looking at characters. Why do they act like this? How do they change? Do those new things they do change our ideas? And let's pay attention to a character's desires and how those things are achieved. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to get those 3 things written down. So when we come into small group and we say, hey, can you show me what you wrote down today? We should be able to see this in there because we have 2 minutes right now as a group to write them down. We got 1 more minute. 1 more minute, then we're going to move on. Okay, so we're going to come back together and we're going to kind of talk about a little bit more about what experts kind of do and how we focus on more detailed parts of a book. And so we're going to use a story arc to kind of talk about that. And we're going to talk about a story called The 3 Billy Goats Gruff. So some of you guys may have know this story, have read it before. We're going to kind of talk about how that works in a story arc. If you guys remember in your writing lesson, we kind of talked about the story mountain the other day, but there's a few different parts of the story mountain that we see, the story arc. The first one is the exposition, which is where we learn who the characters are and what the setting is. Then we usually have a problem get developed that comes up pretty early in the story. Like in Tiger Rising, we see that the problem early is that Rob is not very happy where he is, and he has a lot of challenges with school going on, right? Then we have the rising action, and that's how the problem continues to get worse and worse and worse in the story. Finally, you reach what we call the climax. That's the turning point. That's where the problem is at its worst, and we're going to start figuring out how to solve the problem. Then you have the falling action where you're going kind of down that mountain where we're figuring out how is the problem getting solved and things being better. And then the resolution at the end where you see how the problem solved. So I don't know, raise your hand. I may have to do a lot of explaining here. If you've ever heard or you remember the story of the 3 Billy Goats Gruff. So I see 1 hand and it's Miss Stewart. So we'll spend some time explaining the 3 Billy Goats Gruff. So in the story, there's a troll under a bridge, and there's 3 brothers that are billy goats. And the first one goes up to cross the bridge, and the troll says that he's going to eat him. And the goat says, well, why would you eat me when I have 2 brothers that still have to cross the bridge, and they're coming behind me? They're both bigger than I am. So you should eat one of the bigger ones. And the troll says, okay, you can go. So he walks over a bridge and then goes over in a spot to eat in a field. Then the second brother comes up, and the troll is like, I'm going to eat you. And he's like, well, you could eat me, but my other brother who still has to come is the biggest of all of us, and you should save your appetite for the biggest one of us. And the troll says, okay, and he lets him go across. Then the third one comes up, and he's so big that he just headbutts the troll right off the bridge into the water, and he walks across and he goes to eat, and they're all three able to eat. So there's kind of some important details in the story that help develop that arc, right? And the first one is that they introduce us to all three of the billy goats and the troll as well. And the problem very early, the obstacle is that there's this troll on a bridge and there's these billy goats that need to get over the bridge to get to the pasture and eat. All three of them kind of have their own way, their own obstacle of how to get over, right? The troll's the obstacle, but really the first two have to be clever enough to figure out how to get across because they're not as big as they're the biggest one, the older brother, and they have to kind of sneak across where he just knocks the troll out of the way and goes across the bridge on his merry way. So they all have a different obstacle and how they respond to that obstacle, and they all have a reason for why they need to get across the bridge to eat the grass. We're going to kind of talk about that in a more complicated way with more advanced characters. So we're going to look at the end of chapter 6 of The Tiger Rising. And I want you guys to make this chart right over here. I want everyone in their notebook to make this little 4-section chart. You're going to write wants, motivations, obstacles, and response. Okay, so we're going to read this chapter and talk about Rob's different areas with that and how they fit in. So I want you to write down all 4 of those things right now. All right, in your notebooks. I'm going to give you 1 minute to make this chart. Write down wants, motivations, obstacles, and response. This is another thing when we ask to see your notebooks, we should be able to see that it is done. Then we're going to read the end of that chapter and we're going to fill it out together. I'm gonna give you like another minute still. So about 1 more minute to write down that chart and those 4 words. Wants, motivations, obstacles, and response. Okay, so we're gonna move on. If you haven't finished making that chart, you can kind of continue to do it while I'm reading this section of The Tiger Rising. And then we're gonna go through and kind of fill out those sections together about Rob. So as I'm reading this, it's a short little section. I want you to think about a few different things. What do you notice Rob wants or what Rob wants to do? What do you think his motivation? Motivation means the reason for doing something. So what do you think his motivation is for doing that something? And then lastly, pay attention to what's kind of challenging and in his way. And then we're going to do the response part together as well. So here's that section, all right? It says, in a minute, the faded red double doors of the lunchroom swung open and Sistine Bailey came marching through them, her head held high. Behind her was a group of kids, and just when Sistine noticed Rob sitting on the bench, one of the kids threw something at her. Rob couldn't tell what, but it hit her, whatever it was. Run, he wanted to yell at her. Hurry up and run. But Rob didn't say anything. He knew better than to say anything. He just sat there and stared at Sistine with his mouth open, and she stared back at him. Then she turned and walked back into a group of kids like somebody walking into deep water. I'm going to read that section one more time. Pay close attention to what does Rob want to do, what's his reason for that, what challenges is in his way. In a minute, the faded red double doors of the lunchroom swung open and Sistine Bailey came marching through them, her head held high. Behind her was a whole group of kids, and just when Sistine noticed Rob sitting there on the bench, one of the kids threw something at her. Rob couldn't tell what, but it hit her, whatever it was. Run, he wanted to yell at her. Hurry up and run. But he didn't say anything. He knew better than to say anything. He just sat there and stared at Sistine with his mouth open, and she stared back at him. Then she turned and walked back into the group of kids like somebody walking into deep water. All right, so we're going to take a minute and talk about, in that section we just read, what is it Rob wants? What's his motivation or the reason he wants to do that? And what obstacles are in the way? So let's first look at want. In that little short scene we just read, what is it that Rob wants or wants to do? Jay, go ahead. Thank you for raising your hand.
He wants to say run.
Yep, that's exactly right. He wants to say something, but he doesn't. So everybody take a minute and write that down under wants. Rob wants to say something, but he doesn't. Write that down on your chart. Okay, I'll keep that up there. We're going to go on. So why do you think Rob wants to say something? Why do you think he wants to yell something? Why would he want to yell something out? Even though he doesn't, why would he want to? Ania?
He wants to, but he doesn't because he wants to yell out, "Stop throwing whatever they were throwing at her."
So he wants to do that, but we're looking at why would he want to do that? Why does he want to? Why does he wish he could yell at them to stop, or why does he wish he could tell her to run? But why he doesn't? But why does he want to?
Because he wants to stand up for her.
Yeah, he wants to help Sistine, right? It says run. He wanted to yell at her, hurry up and run. You don't have to write the part in green, just the part in white. But under motivations, we're going to write he wants to help Sistine, right? So he wants to say something. And the reason for that is he wants to help her. Even though he doesn't really know her that well, she's a little bit different. He wants to help her. He doesn't, but he wants to. So you don't need to write the green part, just the white part. He wants to say something but didn't. He wants to help Sistine. Then going down to obstacles. What's kind of in Rob's way? Why is he not doing anything? Somebody besides Jay and Ania. Why is it that Rob doesn't do anything? What's the obstacle or what's kind of blocking him from that? I'm going to call in somebody random who's been, let's see. CJ, why is it Rob doesn't do anything?
Because he's afraid.
Yeah, he holds stuff in, right? You don't need to say the green, write down the green part. But Rob doesn't do anything. He holds stuff in. He didn't say anything. He knew better than to say anything. He just sat there and stared at Sistine with his mouth open, and she stared right back, right? He knows that that's his personality. If he says something, there's going to be problems, and then so he just holds everything in. So he wants to say something but didn't. He wants to help Sistine is his reason for wanting to say something, and the reason he's not right now is because he holds stuff in. He's quiet. He kind of knows the deal and what's going to happen. So then moving forward with that, does anybody remember how he ends up responding to that obstacle? So he holds stuff in, but what does he end up doing? And how does he respond to that obstacle? Clay, go ahead.
He runs, and that gives Sistine some time to run away because the bullies are following him.
So he does run. He does something else before he runs. What's he do before he runs? Cynthia?
He yells, "Hey."
Yeah, Rob yells, hey, stop, right? He yells, hey, stop it, leave her alone. and then he runs. I know that's off the screen, so I'm going to push it there, or off this section, right? So there we have like that's a complete turnaround that about the way Rob acts normally, but it shows us something, it reveals some stuff for us about Rob, right? He wants to say something, but he doesn't. He wants to do it to help Sistine. He holds stuff in, so that's kind of keeping him from doing it. How does he respond to that obstacle? Well, he says, you know what? This is worth it. I'm going to yell something, and I'm going to help her. And he does. That's how he responds. So our goal today, when you guys go out and work on your own, is that you're going to be able to talk about your character's want, their motivation, their reason for wanting that, the obstacle or the thing that's in the way, and then what they're doing to get past that obstacle. All right? So that's going to be your job within your own book. We're going to probably get started because we still have to go through what your job is today. We're probably going to get started a little bit late for our first reading group, and that's okay. We need to take the time to make sure we get this. So I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to finish writing down what's on that chart, and then we're going to move on. Okay, so moving on. The protagonist, I want to kind of focus on this. The main character is the protagonist of the story. So whoever's talking the most, if it's about themselves, or if it's a book like where they're talking in third person and talking about the character, whichever character you see the most is the main character is the protagonist. And the Tiger Rising, that's Rob, right? Our protagonist is Rob. I'm going to fill that in. Maybe. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to write it. Don't judge me because I'm writing with my computer pad. But it's Rob. He's our protagonist. And so when you're reading about your protagonist in fiction, you can probably count the fact that it's going to pay off for you big time to focus on that character's motivations, what they feel deep down, why they want to do something, and what obstacles they run into throughout the story. So focus first on your main character and pay attention to those things we put in our chart today about the main character. Then you can focus on the secondary characters. So think about these things in the book. Who can read that first one? Michael.
What does your character desire?
Yep. So desire. What do they want? What do they feel like they need to do or what wish they could do? What is the next one say? Read the next one for me, CJ.
Does your character have a mission?
Yep. So is there something your character is working for or trying to get done or accomplished? If they do, that's probably something they desire. Let's see. Eric, can you read the third one right here? Does your character have?
Sure, I'll do it. Does your character have something that motivates him or her to act in a certain way?
Thank you. So is there a reason? Is there a reason your character is acting a certain way or doing certain things? Alex, Jay, can you read the next one? What or who?
What or who is getting in the way of the character's desire?
Thank you. If you guys couldn't hear me, it said what or who is getting in the way of your character's desire. So that even what or who could even be the character themselves, right? Rob is really the one getting in his own. Okay, thank you. Rob is really the one getting in his own way in the Tiger Rising. His own personality is the obstacle. And then the last one says, what obstacles or challenges are preventing your character from getting this big thing he or she wants? So focus on those things as you're working today. So your job is going to be to draw that same chart in your notebook. Then pick the character from your book to focus on. Fill out the chart and use the chart to write a paragraph about your character in Canvas. And I'm going to show you some examples of those paragraphs. So writing a little short blurb about your character like this one. Amber is the type of person who is dishonest because when her mom said, let me see what has happened to your ears, Amber put her hands down and showed her ears to her mom. And her mom starts to yell, how could You didn't. I told you have to wait until you are 12. This makes me realize that Amber is disobedient, right? So that little paragraph written is just an example from another student. These examples are posted on Canvas with the assignment. So when you go in to do the assignment today, fill out your chart and then write a paragraph. You can either type your paragraph or you can write your paragraph in your notebook and read it to us in a media response, okay? But your job is to fill out your chart and then write a little blurb about your character. We're going to try to help you get that done in small group and focus on some of these things today as well, okay? My 9-10 group, I'm going to ask you, so Derek, Clay, Alejandro, Corbin, and Sue, anybody who's on here, I'm going to ask you just stay on the Zoom. All right, and we'll just start our group here. If you're in Miss Weibel's group, you're going to log off and go straight to her group. Okay, you need to make the chart and do that. If you need to see what the chart's supposed to look like, it's in the assignment on Canvas. So when you go into Canvas and you go into Wednesday and today's reading assignment, this chart picture is right there with your job right there. You can go there to see it if you need to. I'm going to say this loud because it's happening. If you are in the 940 group,